everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Read Right to Left podcast. I am Simply G, a manga tuber who you guys may know here on YouTube. I am joined by my lovely co-host, Ray from Whimsical Pictures. We are both huge manga fans, so we decided to start this podcast talking about many of the series we love, like, dislike, whatever topic really we take a liking to, and this is hopefully going to be a once a month thing for us. And today's topic is going to be pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Our top 5 favorite manga, our reasons, have a bit of discussion about each of them, but I'll let Ray introduce herself a little bit as well, and then we can start on our list.
Yep.
So take it away.
Okay. Yeah, so like G said, my name is Ray, and I also sometimes make videos about manga. I am currently teaching in Japan, so I read a mix of manga in both English and Japanese. And I like manga a whole lot. And me and G often talk about manga through various channels, social media wise, and so we thought we would take a shot at maybe turning some of those thoughts into something more substantial, I guess.
Yeah, so we hope you guys enjoy listening to it, because that's the plan. So I think rather than spending too much time on sort of introducing this topic, we'll head straight into our top 5. Ray, if you could tell us your number 5, please.
All right. So my number 5 was really hard to come up with. It was definitely the most difficult number, I think, because I just kind of love so many things, and just like putting this list together was just like choosing between all of my hundreds of children. And you could just as easily replace the title I went with, you know, any number of others, but I decided to go with one of my favorite currently ongoing series. Probably one of the longest series that I'm collecting right now. I don't tend to go for long series, but this is an exception. And that is Yona of the Dawn by Mizuho Kusanagi.
Now, that's a great series. What do you really enjoy about that particular series? Because I love it as well. I'm sure most people know I love it. Most people who are reading it that I know do also love it. It's a really good series currently coming out. But what in particular made you choose this one for number 5?
Yeah, so for one, it's almost representative of a genre for me, because I am a huge fan of this kind of sweeping epic Eastern fantasy series, often isekai, although that is like someone from our world getting swept away to a fantasy world if anybody watching doesn't know what isekai means at this point. Yona of the Dawn is not an isekai series, but a lot of these types of sweeping epic fantasies with sort of a teenage heroine at the center of it were a staple, especially of the 90s and the early aughts, and really were still kind of, I guess it was kind of the tail end of that trend when I was first really getting into manga. So
yeah, with the Fushigi Yugis and the 12 Kingdoms.
Before there was Team Edward and Team Jacob, there was Team Tamahome and Team Hotohori and Team Toski. I guess there's three bachelors, eligible bachelors. But yeah, I am a big fan of that subgenre of sort of these almost, well, not almost, coming of age stories.
Yeah.
Centering on sort of a young female heroine learning about the world and being sort of very suddenly sort of thrown out into this crazy wild adventure
And not just thrown out into adventure, but thrown into responsibility. Usually she's in charge of other people, which for a lot of young women is not a position they're in that often.
Yeah.
So it is a really interesting, obviously, as you mentioned, it's sort of a more standard or long-standing form of isekai that we've seen comparatively to like the current isekai that we're getting, where it is mainly like this male wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
So this type of isekai, although this isn't technically isekai, but this type of story is more so that same idea, in where you're putting an individual, a young person, in a place of power, and usually with an ability that is not really comparable to the other people around her or around them, and they're usually given this respect that they otherwise may not have, and that's obviously a very empowering thing for young women. And unfortunately, as we've seen, it sort of isekai as a whole has dropped off of that idea of the female main character.
Yeah, and you definitely these days see more of like almost a hero or heroine, even in like the shoujo isekai that is out now, like Accomplishments of the Duke's Daughter comes to mind immediately.
Yeah, My Next Life is a Villainess. Whatever that one is.
Yeah,
that
which I really like that.
Yeah,
series,
it's a very fun series.
It's a trip, but there's almost this in these stories, the hero and heroine are sort of not they're not challenged on what they believe. They're almost sort of validated in how everything about how they already are, and just told over and over that it's the world that's at fault, not them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's almost the antithesis of this kind of story, where basically everything this young girl believes is challenged and turned on its head, and she's forced to, come out of it with a stronger sense of self and who she is and what she values, which is infinitely more interesting. So how this relates to Yona in particular, just like a, 1 or 2 sentence rundown of the plot, kind of spoiling the first chapter or so, I guess. We have this spoiled princess named Yona in a sort of Korean, Chinese, Japanese sort of fantasy world, and it is her 16th birthday, and she is eager to go woo this boy that she is in love with, a childhood friend, her cousin, which, whatever. I promise it's not part of the story. But yeah, so she's super into her cousin and she's eager to woo him. So she goes, I guess, to find him or something, and ends up walking in on this very man that she loves, standing covered in blood over the corpse of her father, the king. And he usurps the throne, and her, with her life in danger, she, of course, is forced to flee the palace with her trusty, hunky bodyguard in tow, and live as a fugitive on the run, trying to figure out what she's going to do about this vile usurper. And she ends up sort of amassing a merry band of misfits that has to do with this ancient myth and, all that fun fantasy stuff. But it's about her essentially having to grow up and be the leader that she was born to be really fast. This series is so compulsively readable. Every single volume is just like, I just get obsessed with the series all over again. Like, I just want to devour volume after volume. And then it's so depressing when it's just like one new volume that's out and I have to wait a couple more months for the next one. This is one series where I got so impatient I ended up buying like 5 volumes in Japanese because it's like super behind the Japanese release. And I'm trying to hold back on doing that again. It's so hard.
So much of a temptation.
Every time I read a volume, I just don't want to stop. I just want to be in like a constant state of reading this series. It is, I think, a series that has an extremely broad appeal. It covers quite a few genres. I mean, obviously it's primarily a fantasy adventure. It's definitely, focusing in on sort of the swashbuckling and the, high seas. I guess there's not a whole lot of seas. There's some seas. There's some pirates. I love my pirate husband, voiced by Junichi Suwabe.
But you really love the characters, especially that one. And I think that the whole cast of characters is really likable. That's one of the other reasons it really draws you in. There's no character that, if in my experience, I find like really irritating or just not enjoyable to read.
For sure. They're just so much fun. It's a great ensemble cast. Their banter and the way they play off each other is really great. The humor in this series is consistently excellent. It's one of the series that I find myself laughing out loud the most at, I think. Of course, there's a little bit of romance in there as well. It's not enough to sort of overwhelm the plot, but it's there to add some spice if you want it. There's some political machinations, which are always fun. It's just basically whatever you could want from a fantasy adventure series. Yona's got it for you, and it's got it executed excellently.
Yona, as I think I've said and established, love that series as well. It's fantastic. If you're not reading it, I think volume 19 just came out. It's super duper good. You're really missing out if you haven't picked it up. If you're someone who hasn't really tried shoujo before, it's a really good starting point too. Like you said, it has a lot of general appeal. It doesn't feel like, if you're not a fan of this high school first love romance type of stuff that I think a lot of people think of when they think of shoujo, it's not that, and it does have really something for everyone. So yeah, great series.
I will say that if you're a little put off by Yona's character in the first couple chapters, one of the main sort of elements of this type of subgenre is watching the heroine grow as a person, and Yona is someone who, she kind of spends the first volume in a bit of shock, but she quickly sort of comes into her own. So I've seen people who are underwhelmed by her character in the first volume, but if you pick up the second volume, I think that you'll find very quickly why she's such a popular character with so many people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give her some time.
Well, with that, I think I will go on to my number 5.
Go.
Like with you, it was really difficult making this list. There's so many series I love, adore, talk about, think about, and it is really like choosing between your darlings. There's no easy way to go about it. I have done this so where I have at least one series from each of the main demographics, so shonen, shoujo, seinen, josei. There is an overlap with one of those, so I have 2. But I did want to sort of cover all of my bases because obviously I have very wide tastes and I like a lot of series, but I think there will be some very obvious similarities between a lot of these series as well, so we'll just get to that when we get to it. But my number 5 is the manga Mushishi. It's a seinen series, one that I know you have read, but it's a wonderful episodic series about this individual named Ginko who has the ability to see mushi, which is basically the name for the most primitive form of life in the world, in the environment. Everything is built and comes from mushi, so it's an integral part of this whole ecosystem, including humans. And unfortunately, usually when mushi interact with humans, they cause various effects, mostly negative, and he wanders around Japan helping people who have sort of gotten caught up with various mushi. And it's a beautiful story of sort of coexisting with nature and the way that even though the mushi aren't inherently doing anything, they're just trying to survive and exist amongst us, they're not really a villain of the piece, but they still obviously have negative aspects to them. But it is bringing this, as I said, this coexistence between humanity and this more fundamental, simple piece of life and an integral piece of life that you can't just eradicate, because obviously it's so important to everything that's going on. Other people can't see Mushi. He is sort of like other characters you see in media. He's able to see them. He's sort of an abnormality in that sense. And so, yes, it is just his wandering, his various interactions with different people, how the Mushi have affected them in many different ways. There's an element of very high tension in certain chapters. There's also elements of like body horror and that sort of thing. So if you're into things that are a little bit creepy, definitely check it out. And this one does have a wonderful anime adaptation as well. Phenomenal, and is probably the easier one to recommend to try because it does give so much to this series. I think that should be a topic that we discuss all on its own, is just various adaptations of manga that may have done it better. But the music, the animation for the show is beautiful. But I would be amiss to not mention the manga as well, because it is so good. But quite out of print, unfortunately, currently, but you can still get it digitally thanks to Kodansha.
Yes. This will appear later in this podcast, and I think I will give my own thoughts on it then.
Yes. But it is, obviously, it's on your list, so it is one that we both enjoy. Yes. It's one that, again, whenever I see people reading it or watching it, or whenever I recommend it to people, it's one that most everyone has enjoyed and really captured this sense of awe that I don't think a lot of people really recognize is possible in anime or manga. Because it's very different to a lot of the most popular stuff that's a lot very bombastic and a lot of action and all of these things. It doesn't have that, but it's still a very genuine story that does capture your heart.
It doesn't have all the crazy robots and explosions, but it's just as captivating.
Exactly.
In a quieter way. Yeah. I'll talk about that a little later.
Yes. So, you have your number 4?
My number 4 is not Mushishita. Yeah, my number 4 is Nana by Ayazawa. This is a josei series, I think. Well, it's kind of weird in that it ran in a magazine that's sort of in between shoujo and josei demographics. It ran in Cookie, but you know, if I was going to recommend it to someone, it'd be more towards someone who's interested in reading a josei series than a shoujo series. The characters are all in their 20s for the most part, but I do think it was one of the first kind of josei titles that Shoujo Beat ever put out.
Yeah, I believe so.
I remember it being out alongside Honey and Clover, which is also a josei series, which I also considered for my number 5 spot.
It's a very good series. I can understand why.
Yep. But it did not quite make it. Nana did make my number 4. This is basically, I first read this series in high school when I don't think I was quite old enough to know what to make of it, but it stuck with me, and I still find myself just like lost in thought about it every once in a while. Like, man, that was a good series. So Nana is about 2 20-year-old women named Nana who end up sort of on the train together going to Tokyo. They're both from completely different walks of life. One of them is going to meet her boyfriend and is sort of, I guess you could say, a bit of a girly girl, like fashionable, you know, not really thinking too much beyond mooching off her boyfriend for the foreseeable future. And the other is a punk rocker going to try to make it with a band. And they sort of find out that they are renting the same apartment together. They're now roommates. And from then, their fates are further and further intertwined. It is a lot about sort of the punk rock scene in Tokyo and like the rock star life. But more than anything, it's just about these sort of 20-something kids who have no idea what they're doing, just making extremely questionable decisions over and over
everyone
again.
in their 20s. Nobody knows what we're doing.
Exactly. Just more and more relatable each passing year. Nobody in this series is perfect, or even, I mean, I would say pretty much every character goes through a huge chunk of the series being completely unlikable.
Mm-hmm.
But they feel so true to life in the way that they are messy and, like, just frustrating and contradicting themselves constantly, just tripping over their own decisions, trying to figure out how to live a good life and to live a fulfilling life,
mm-hmm.
and to have loving relationships with the people around them. Ayazawa just does such a good job of writing these deeply flawed and yet deeply sympathetic characters that maybe like Moyoko Ano or Kyoko Okazaki, that type of manga, I guess.
Yeah.
But I feel like her work isn't quite as cynical as those creators.
Yeah, her characters, and I'll talk a little bit about my own experiences with Yazawa's work a little bit later, but her characters they definitely feel like people that you could just meet. Even within themselves and with their own rationality, they can be conflicted. They feel like, you know, they're people, you know. They don't feel like characters in a story who have things all worked out, who have the answers to everything, or even the answers to some things. Like characters that do reflect life, and I think that most people can see either themselves or other people they know, friends, family, whatever, in them. And so it does make it more personal and easier for you to attach your own interpretation to it. And I personally have not read Nana. I have seen Paradise Kiss and wasn't a huge fan of it, but I think, like you said when you introduced Nana and your experience with Nana, I watched it in high school and didn't know what to think of it, but it definitely stuck with me. And I'm not really a fan of Paradise Kiss, but for many of the reasons that you mentioned, you really do like Nana, and that the characters are unlikable but very human and understandable as to why they're doing things, how they work through things. I will never say that I hate Paradise Kiss, because I do think it has a lot of value, and I think if I went back to it now with a different perspective, being older, being someone who has had that period of her life past, but still like struggling through her 20s, and gaining, I think, a bit more sympathy for myself and my peers who are in similar situations, that I will not necessarily enjoy it, but understand it more and have it be more effective as to the message it's telling me, or telling its readers. I do hope to read Nana, but at 20-something volumes, it's a low priority.
Yeah, it's also like probably never going to end.
Yeah, it's on like, Infini hiatus or whatever it is.
It's on hiatus, doing quote marks, in the sense that after 21 volumes, Yazawa did end up in the hospital for a while, and once she got out, she expressed publicly that she was no longer interested in writing the story of Nana for the time being. So,
and it's been a long time since then as well. It's been several years.
It's been several years since then. So more than likely, Nana will just end on this horrible cliffhanger.
Oh no, that's always the worst.
The most just And I mean, the story could be wrapped up in, 2 more volumes, probably. It feels like this last place where it ended was like that big climactic moment before the story reaches its end, and it's like, you could just please. But that's not my decision to make. That's up to her and her feelings. So
yeah, and it is, I mean, for everything you've said, and from everything I've ever heard about Nana, it doesn't mean you shouldn't read it, or at least try it, because there's still a lot you can get, even if it is a somewhat inconclusive series, leaving you hanging for close to a decade.
I know calling it a soap opera kind of makes it sound like I'm lessening it, but I really do mean it in the best sense of the word, in that it really is just following the drama of these people's lives, and you're going on a journey with them. It's not the destination, it's the journey with these lovable idiots. And I guess on a last note, I will also say that this series includes the better sort of portrayals of abusive relationships that I've seen in manga, where it does feel very true to real life cycles of abuse. You understand why the victims stay in these relationships. You understand sort of why people don't intervene, and maybe even don't even realize that something is happening. Just like every other human relationship in this series, it's complex and it's layered in a way that I think similar relationships in Paradise Kiss maybe weren't.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that does. I understand what you're saying, and I can definitely...
And I'm pretty sure the abuser here was at least somewhat inspired by Toga from Utena, because his character design is the same. So, I will eat my hat if he wasn't partially inspired by that ass hat. But yeah, that's my number 4.
And
what about you?
So my number 4 is another series that I absolutely love. I love the anime adaptation as well. I think it's one that really is something that more and more people need to read. It's sort of one that I don't think a lot of people think of when they think of this demographic either. So this is, my number 4 is Descending Stories by Haruko Kumota, which is a wonderful josei about a rakugo traditional storyteller, who throughout the Showa period, he works and he sort of goes up in the ranks until he's sort of at the top of the art. He's really seen as one of the last true masters. And the Showa period, for people who aren't that familiar with Japanese eras and history and that sort of thing, was between 1926 and 1989, I believe.
Yep.
And so obviously huge chunk of the 20th century there. A lot happened, a lot changed. Japan went through wars, went through ups and downs economically and socially, so many things happening. This idea of not just Japan, but the world, of course, but this eventuality of the introduction of technology and how entertainment changed. And so as a traditional art form, rakugo really fell out of favor with the general populace for a long time. People had television now, they had the cinema, they didn't want to be listening to storytellers sitting on a stage, telling stories that are hundreds of years old. It wasn't what the young people were super into, in the 80s. So for our main character, he feels like with his life, he's become emblematic of the era, of the art form, and when he eventually passes on and, dies, that will be the death of Rakugo. It's an interesting thing in that even the title references double suicide and this idea of him committing double suicide with the art form itself. And I've said this before in regards to this character in the series, but obviously that's a very, not selfish, but like self-absorbed perception of it. But for him, it's been his life for so long, and he's seen it slowly dying, and for him, his life really stopped at a certain point, that he doesn't have a new hope or perspective for the future until later on in the series, and we see that slowly changing. So it's not just obviously his lifetime and the people in his life and how he's dealt with losing people, very important to him, and sort of retreating to Rakugo and relying on it to get through his day-to-day. We also see how this traditional art form has to adapt to a modern era, and this idea of preserving the traditional arts, how important they are as a cultural history. If we lose them, we lose so much of a nation's history. We see it all the time with regards to indigenous languages, art forms, whatever else, and Rakugo is sort of in that category. And kind of how later on at the end of the series, you see how Rakugo has managed to survive and adapt and change, and why it has. And that reflected in our character and how he sort of realizes and changes and does decide to believe in things at the end. It's very, very beautiful. I've called this series, probably the best piece of art, best piece of media I've read, seen, watched in a long time. It really doesn't function like a lot of other manga. It's one that I think you could make this story in any sort of format, whether it be live action, whether it be radio drama, whether it be comic, whether it be anime, and it can still bring something and be elevated and tell a story that is incomparable to everything else there. There's so much weaved into this story, not just this idea of identity and separating art and the artist, or even family, which is a huge part of it. There's just so many things, and I am very emotionally attached to it. I cry every time. This is another one, like with Mushishi, I didn't mention this, but I was introduced to that series via the anime first. This series, same thing. And the anime is phenomenal. It definitely watch it. It's on Crunchyroll, guys. Please. And even having watched the anime, sitting down and reading the manga, knowing what the ending was going to be, knowing like I'm gonna be strong, I'm not gonna cry, I still bawled like a little baby. Before I did my pickups video with the final volume, I was like, okay, I haven't read this yet. I know I'm gonna love it. I don't need to read it to know that. I flipped through it and I was choking up. Like, I didn't even read it. I was just like, oh yeah. And then just, why? My heart, it hurt so much. I'm so overwhelmed. And then I had to film a video, so that was fun.
Yeah, I own this entire manga. I was able to complete it with last year's Right Stuff holiday sale when I was home for the holidays, but I didn't get the chance to read it when I was home, and it is currently in my parents' closet with most of the rest of my English manga. It's very kind of them to keep it stored instead of, selling off all of my manga, but especially hearing you talk about it, I'm very much looking forward to it. I did watch the anime. I'm a huge fan of Haruko Kumota. If you aren't familiar with her, literally everything that she's done that isn't this series is BL, but that doesn't make it any less amazing. Itoshi no Nekoke by her is my favorite BL, I think, by a landslide. I think that she is an incredible creator, and this series, even coming out of someone who I already knew was incredible, it was just watching this anime was like, it's such a trip, like watching something and knowing it's one of the best things that you've ever seen as you're watching it.
Oh, absolutely. Props to Dean, Studio Dean as well, because they have a very bad reputation.
Nobody knew they had it in them.
They've done the odd series here and there that have been good. Like Sankarea was alright. That had really good style to it. But by God, they pulled out all of the stops for Descending Stories.
God, it's so well directed.
It's so beautiful.
And then, like, the direction, the way that the Rakugo is, like, weaved.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way it weaves between the images of the story and the images of the storyteller in the room with the audience. Where it's like you can feel yourself in the audience getting lost in his words. And it's just, like, so good.
You can understand why he's such a captivating character and why people have been drawn to him and his Rakugo for so long. You don't feel like you're watching this old guy telling a story. Like, oh yeah, okay, grandpa. Like, that's fine. You get caught up into it. He truly is an artist.
Kaworu's alright at everything. This is the role that won me over on Akira Ishida.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, my God, from child to deathbed, like, this character's entire life, and he portrayed it just through his voice. I can't even. So good. Yeah, and that's just my feelings on the anime, so I'm definitely looking forward to the manga.
And you've actually gone to see Rakugo, haven't you? Just recently.
Just recently. I've seen Rakugo once. Yeah, I think only 2 of the 4 performers I saw. Because with Rakugo, they have kind of like, I guess, stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Or a concert is like, you have like your headliner and then you have openers.
Yeah, supporting acts.
Who are like local, in this case, Rakugo performers. A couple of them still sort of apprenticing. One of them was a recent debut. The main guy was coming from Osaka. He's like a headlining Rakugo artist there. He's quite famous right now, but his hometown is my town, so he comes here essentially just out of love for Matsuyama. He comes down here every year and does a show in this like tiny little temple for like, what was it? I think it was $15.
Oh, nice.
So really nice of him to do that, but he's like known for doing Rakugo in several languages now.
Wow.
He was in New York like just before this for the first time.
That's very impressive.
And yeah, so he did one that he had written himself, and it was just murder on my Japanese ability because it was entirely based on him like making puns between like locations in Osaka and the Japanese underworld. And I was like, wait, I'm kind of proud that I even understood the premise of the joke. But his whole manner was just like so funny and so out there. He's a very Osaka personality, even if he's from Matsuyama, so that was a blast. And then the lady before him, women doing Rakugo is a big thing within Descending Stories, so for me, who's like only prior exposure to Rakugo is Descending Stories, like seeing a woman like up there on stage like it's nothing, because it is nothing now. It's just there's a lot of female Rakugo performers now. Was like, yeah,
yay!
And hers was the best. She had written her own, and it was about a mother trying to convince her kid's teacher to raise the grade on his test, even though he'd made like almost aggressively stupid answers to all of the questions. And I laughed the most at that one. I'm sure it helps that, that vocabulary in that story is vocabulary I use every day. So my friend who was with me agreed that that was the best one. And then there was the other two guys before her did not original Rakugo, but stories that had been passed down. The one guy, he wasn't very good.
Ooh.
I couldn't, it was really hard to tell. I'm sorry to this gentleman. Again, I was talking with my friend about it, and it wasn't just me not understanding Japanese. It was hard to tell, like, when he was switching characters, which if you've seen or read Descending Stories or seen Rakugo, is a huge part of it. Is like, it is, you are a one-man storyteller, you are voicing,
you need the distinct character voices of the individuals.
You're voicing every character in a story, you know, the women, the men, the children, the elderly characters. You are everybody, and they all need to be distinct. You can't put on different hats to represent each person. You've got a fan, you've got your sleeves, and you've got there's like a handkerchief, I think is the other thing.
Yeah, I believe so.
And that's all you've got. That and your body and your voice. And this guy, I just couldn't tell, like, he didn't change his voice very much. He didn't change how he was talking. So it was hard to get a grip on, like, when he was switching characters. And he was just talking very fast. I don't know. That one was kind of a miss. Maybe he was nervous. I don't know. The guy before him did a story that was about, oh god, the name of the monster is slipping my mind, but it's the famous Japanese monster that's just like a beautiful woman with a super long neck.
Oh, yes.
It was about a guy who basically had no marriage prospects and was offered the chance to marry this beautiful, amazing woman. Everything about her was perfect, except in the middle of the night, her head would pop and her neck would just like grow and grow and grow and grow. And he was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then, you know, has to deal with the consequences.
The Rokuro Kubi.
Rokuro Kubi. That's it. Yeah. That one was good. So, he did a good job. I could tell when he was switching characters.
Sounds like a lot of fun. I'm very jealous, but unfortunately I know very little Japanese, so I probably wouldn't be able to enjoy it to the full extent, but it does sound like a great time. But coming from that, do you have your number 3?
Yes, I do. So back to Mushishi. Should mention that I am slightly delirious from a cold.
It's okay. We forgive you.
We're doing our best. If my voice is a little weird, that is also due to that. But it's a lot better than it was a few days ago. So, yeah, Mushishi by Yuki Urushibara. Obviously, we already got the plot rundown from G, but yeah, I love this series too. I adore it. This is another one where, like, watching it, reading it, it's just that very surreal feeling of knowing that you're watching a masterpiece unfold in front of you and just being in awe of everything that it accomplishes. This is one where I do prefer the anime over the manga adaptation.
Yeah.
I prefer the anime adaptation over the original manga. Just because color and movement and sound do so much for these stories. So I struggled with whether I wanted to put this on the list because of that. But in the end, the manga as well, I love so much that, yes, it is one of my favorites of all time. So
it's just such an incredible story in just every aspect that it does. And like, I mean, again, with Descending Stories, and like I said when I was talking about it, it just manages to capture everything perfectly in sort of every iteration. I haven't seen the live action film, but I've also heard nothing but good things about it. It's a little bit more horror focus, like reliant, but it's almost like, again, it's like taking parts of it and takes what it needs for the tone it wants, and it's done very well from, as I said, what I've heard. But yeah, it's just something that I think you can enjoy in so many different formats, and still gain so much from each type of format. It's so beautiful. I've also heard really good things about the stage play. I again haven't seen it, but
I want to see it. I heard it was amazing.
Yeah.
Like similar levels of praise to what I hear about the Utena musicals. I'm just like, I want to be there. I want to go to there. This series, what do I say? So, it's very Japanese in a way that I think not a lot of anime or manga is. Descending stories, too, to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I'd say my number 3 is also very Japanese. So there's some themes here going in this list. But yeah, it's very distinctly Japanese. It's not something you'd see coming out of Europe or the Americas.
Just thinking about the way that it portrays the supernatural. In the West, we have this idea of the supernatural, of like, if you think of ghosts or monsters or really anything that goes bump in the night, they're always either good or evil.
Yeah.
They're angelic or demonic. You either have like some sad soul trying to get to heaven, or you have something that is explicitly trying to harm you, which when you think about it is such a myopic way to portray the supernatural. And I don't think I would have thought about that if I hadn't have read Mushishi, because Mushishi takes a very Shinto approach to the Mushi, which are essentially supernatural creatures. They're essentially a take on yokai. You have stories like Inside the Cage is take on the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. You've got one that's like String in the Sky, I think it's called, is based on the Hagoromo, famous Japanese folk tales about supernatural occurrences and yokai, people's interactions with mysterious phenomena. The way it portrays the Mushi is that they just are. They're not angelic, they're not demonic. They don't really intend on having anything to do with humanity at all, except as far as humanity are sources of food or shelter. They're not good, they're not evil. They're just surviving in the world the same way that we are. And its portrayal of humanity is very much the same. It's very, very Shinto and very Buddhist also, in how humanity is just another organism living within this natural system. And Mushi, these supernatural creatures, are the same.
And very often they cross over, and sometimes bad things happen, sometimes good things happen. And it's Ginkgo's role as the protagonist and as an individual who can see Mushi to be able to delegate between the two sides.
Yeah, and he is very much sort of metaphorically in between the two worlds. He has this encounter in his past that almost makes him part Mushi. A lot of the episodes that focus on him focus on feeling like he is both apart from and a part of both worlds.
Absolutely.
Which is very compelling. I think people don't give Ginkgo enough credit for being a pretty good protagonist.
No, he's honestly an amazing protagonist. I love him so much. He's
Number one husband.
My sister adores him, which is understandable because he is wonderful. And yeah, if you guys haven't read Mushishi, it's available via Kodansha digitally. If you haven't watched it, I believe both seasons are on Crunchyroll. If not,
the second season is on Crunchyroll.
The second season's on Crunchyroll, I know for sure. I think the first season isn't, then it would be on Funimation's streaming website or whatever they do. So
I think it might be on Netflix.
Maybe, I don't know, but there's lots of ways you can watch it and lots of legal ways.
It's there. Legally, and you can watch it, and you should read it too. The series, it very much, like you said, it feels like a folktale. I love the afterwords that the author writes, talking about her inspiration for a lot of the stories, whether it comes from a specific folktale or just something spooky that happened around a town that she was in. She's got this fascination with small town Japan that I share in some respects, so it's very cool to sort of hear about her adventures going around these sort of tiny, dying towns. A lot of the stories will just come from like ghost stories that she remembers her grandparents telling her when she was a kid.
In that sense,
so cool.
I was just gonna say, in that sense, it reminds me a lot of like Shigeru Mizuki and his inspiration for Kitaro, and his grandmother telling him, or old lady was telling him about the.
Yes, okay. I think both of those creators definitely share a similar admiration for Japanese folklore and for yokai and this oral history that gets passed down.
Yeah.
I think you see a similar reverence for those things in both creators' work. And I think both creators would be just equally fine with just spending an entire day out in the garden drawing a single blade of grass. So you should read Kitaro.
Yeah, Kitaro's great.
When you're done with Mushishi. There's another one I could have put at number 5.
Yeah, it's a great series, and we're getting lovely additions from Drawn and Quarterly. And there's a new anime adaptation as well for people who don't like to read books.
Yes, yeah, and that's also great.
Yeah, it is really very good. I have probably 12 episodes to catch up on it, so I'm a bit behind, but overall
I'm
it's
more behind than you are.
But it's a very solid little show. And I've seen Kitaro is interesting because in terms of anime adaptations, it's had one consistently every single decade since the manga came out. There's a 60s anime, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s ones, and obviously one currently ongoing. I've only seen Hakaba Kitaro, which is one of the earlier 2000s one. That came out on DVD here. I don't think it came out on DVD anywhere outside of Japan aside from Australia. It's a good little show. It was an Otamane show, but very different in tone to current Kitaro. So
current Kitaro is very good.
Yes, it is very good.
What's your number 3, G?
So my number 3 is like, it's almost it was very hard to choose a specific series for this creator. It's almost arbitrary, this choice, but I chose Oku, The Inner Chambers by Fumi Yoshinaga. This is, for people who have watched my videos for a long time, they know I'm a huge Fumi Yoshinaga fan. I love her character writing, everything she's done. I own everything that's been released in English of her work, which is most of it. And Oku is her currently ongoing historical fiction drama about an alternate history in which very well-known, famous figures in Japanese history, emperors, lords, ladies, that have been gender swapped, so they are, rather than being men, which was the reality, they are now women, because in her version of events, prior to this, there was a red pox that swept the nation. It only affected boys between infancy to 20 or 21, so it decimated the population of men, and as such, women have had to take over the roles that were generally held for men. And because it's set in this period when Japan was isolated from the rest of the world, they cut themselves off, nobody was coming in or out, it is this sort of, well, this could be the reality of what happened. We don't know because, it was secret. Japan didn't want the world to know that they were a nation of women, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. This could be the real history of things. And they took up, when women took up positions, they took on male names, so all of the records would have that name, but, in actuality, they were women. It's really, really interesting. Obviously, I personally am a huge history fan, but I think it's still fairly approachable for people who aren't really that knowledgeable about history, especially Japanese history, because I don't think it's something a lot of people outside of Japan learn on a, more general basis. I say this with all of Yoshinaga's writing, but her characters, they feel, again, like you were saying with Nana, they feel like, even though they feel like real people, they feel like they make mistakes, they make stupid decisions, but they're trying their hardest to just get through things, to make things work, or they're trying to, have their own ends met. There's a lot of political scheming, as is expected in a story centered around the emperor and the court. So lots of various, ladies and children and things trying to vie for power. You also see how Japan itself, societally, was changing, because obviously women are in power and men have now become sort of like the precious commodity that you can't, if you have a boy to survive to adulthood, it's very, surprising, and they're treated with kid gloves. And that's why in the story it is centered around the inner chamber, which is basically the harem of the emperor. So rather than being a bunch of young women for a male emperor, these are a bunch of young men for a female emperor. And a lot of families send their son to the inner chambers because they are paid a wage, basically, and they can send that to the family. It's a guarantee that their son will be safe, that it's a stable job, and they'll have it for the entirety of their life, pretty much. And if they manage to gain the good graces of the emperor, if they manage to father a child, say, then they will obviously be in a better position and will be set for life. It's a really, really, really good series. I love there's a particular arc between volumes, I'd say 7 to 10, which is in relation to the beginning of acceptance of Hollander medicine. So when the Dutch came into Japan and were teaching the Japanese, yes, this is Chinese medicine, doesn't know anything about the body. Here's medicine and here's knowledge from the world that we know. And Japan's like, oh my goodness, this is not like anything we've known before. Because obviously the whole premise of the story is set up on the idea that there's a pox that affects men. It's the idea with the Hollander medicine, it's the development of a vaccine, because Western medicine had that. They knew what caused diseases and how to sort of prevent them from killing everyone. And so that part of the story is that development of that vaccine and how it was being distributed and the people behind it. And the two people who are the focus of that particular arc are my favorite, and I love them so much. And at the end of that story, volume 10 made me cry. So I mean, I've said I've cried at 2 of these series so far, but I am a big wuss. But oh my goodness, if it is, I can't say it's necessarily the easiest story to get into, because the way that Viz has decided to translate it is with very old Englishy type of dialogue. But
and it's very shaky too.
Yeah, but it does, once you've read like probably the first volume, once you get into it, once you like figure out what they're going for, I find it does get easier and easier to read. It's not one that is, it's not perfect, but you can understand why they made that choice, and it is very effective how they've managed to do that, even if it does take the audience a little bit to get into it. As I said, this is sort of arbitrary because I love all of Yoshinaga's works, all of her stuff. I mean, her other ongoing work, What Did You Eat Yesterday, is completely different. But I love it just as much. I love Antique Bakery. I love Flower of Life. I love all of her various one-shots, even her BL stuff. There's not a huge amount of her work that I dislike. And again, it's just because how well she can write characters, how emotive her artwork is as well. She has a fairly simple art style, but it draws your attention that much more to how the minutia of expression can change, that it is very effective. But yeah, I'm just a big fangirl, so.
I also like Yoshinaga a lot, but Ooku is one of the biggest shame spots on my TBR. My library in college, I think, had the first 3 volumes, so I've read that much. Every time I see it used, it's like retail price, and I'm like, I'm not buying it. So it's like forever like on my list to get, and then I never end up getting it because I haven't found it for the right price yet. But yeah, I loved those first 3 volumes. The second one, I think, is the one with the monk.
Yeah.
And I remember crying at that story.
Yeah.
So,
there's a lot of crying moments in the series.
So definitely one for me to look forward to, just like Descending Stories.
What are your thoughts on some of her other works, if not Oku in particular?
Yeah, so I like foodie manga. And I'm a big fan of hers in particular. So my favorite Yoshinaga series is What Did You Eat Yesterday? I just can't get enough of it. I love it. I actually just started the drama the other night.
Is it good? I'm sure
I only watched the first episode so far, but I do really like the 2 main actors, and I like they've got her sense of humor like down. Just I don't know, her sense of humor just like cuts like a knife, and I love it. The food looks delicious, which is, very important. So I'm looking forward to watching more of that. I just love how that series handled. I think, it's not controversial to say it's one of the best series with LGBT protagonists coming out right now.
Absolutely.
It is about, I think they're like 40, 45.
Currently in the manga, they're Shiro's in his 50s, early 50s, and I think Kenji has just turned 50. So majority of the manga, they're in their 40s.
I think this first episode they said they were 45. So I mean, they are a well-established gay couple who have been together for quite a few years, and it's really nice just seeing them being cute and domestic together. One of them's a lawyer who's not out at work, and one of them is a hairdresser who is out at work. The lawyer really loves cooking, so basically every chapter is just framed around what he makes the both of them for dinner. And you get a detailed recipe to go with it.
So you can make it yourself.
If you're good in the kitchen, which I'm not, but I can pretend through reading manga like this. If I was gonna try something from a foodie manga, it would be from like Sweetness and Lightning.
Yeah.
Like a Hamburg steak, I can make that. Whatever, like foie gras with like whatever that they make in What Did You Eat Yesterday, I'm like, nope. That's not happening.
The interesting thing about What Did You Eat Yesterday, and that I really appreciate obviously the fact that it's a well-established long-term gay relationship, that there is like this inherent domesticity to the series, that's fantastic. The recipes are also wonderful, but I really like how Shiro, although he does, as the chef, although he does appreciate very good food, he's also very frugal, so a lot of his stuff that he makes, he's trying to make the best type of food he can without spending a huge amount of money. It makes it a lot more approachable for people who are in a similar situation where they're cooking for themselves, cooking for their family, their partner, whatever. You can have a very good meal, a very substantial meal for not a huge amount of money. And if you're smart about what you use, how you cook, it can all be delicious. And
I find there's a lot of really good like tips in terms of like shopping frugally, especially when it comes to like things like fresh vegetables and produce and meats and fish. There's a lot of like tips about like, you know, this is another series I have back in America. So like my most recent exposure to the series was through this drama episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, you know, seeing his method of going to different shops for different types of items, being very familiar with their weekly sales, waiting for, you know, he goes on his way home from work, but it's like, you know, he waits for them to put the stickers on.
Yeah, the discount stickers.
The discount stickers. That's a real thing here, by the way. I gotta tell you, the discount sticker lady is a real thing. Yeah, they balance each other well, because this episode had him like pinching pennies to make this meal, and then, you know, he totally blows up at Kenji when he walks home, and he's like, "Did you really go to the convenience store and buy that stupid Haagen-Dazs ice cream again?" Like, but they don't have this flavor at the supermarket.
I'm just treating myself. It's okay. We can afford it. It's like, no, we have a budget.
This is why you don't have any savings. But then in the end, they end up, you know, eating the ice cream together on the couch anyway, and it's very sweet.
And that, I think, perfectly encapsulates what the series is, because not only is it good meals, cooking, food, really interesting characters, but the idea of, at least for me, like my experience has always been as a family or as a unit, like partners or whatever, you do at mealtimes, it's when you have that option to catch up, when you get together and share time together.
Yeah.
And it's a very important part of, I think, most families' routines, especially for both of them. They're both working adults. They don't have a huge amount of time during the day that when they can sit down for a meal, whether that be dinner or lunch on a day off or whatever, it does give them that opportunity to, you know, check in with each other and grow and, you know, talk to each other. It's really nice having that aspect in a manga, and you don't see that very often, sort of in general.
And that's something I think you see across Yoshinaga's like more food-centric manga. Whether it's this, which is obviously the longest one she's done, or Antique Bakery, or Not Love But Delicious Foods Make Me So Happy, which is still the best title I've ever come across. The new mom isekai, what is it? What's it called?
Do you love your mom with her 2-hit attacks?
And her 2-hit multi-target attacks. That's a pretty good title too. But I think Yoshinaga's still got her beat.
Yeah.
Whatever. That thing.
Yeah.
Like that one as well, just seeing the fact that she chose to like write her autobiographical manga in the context of like the food that she eats with her friends in Tokyo.
Yeah.
I think says so much about her philosophy about food and how it brings people together.
Yeah, a restaurant guide for the discerning. Just hit up all her favorite places.
Yep. Love it. I love that one too.
Yeah.
That's another favorite.
They're all good. Everything's good. If you haven't read any of her books, please try them. They're all so good. You don't even have to read her BL if you don't want to, but even her BL, 99% of it is great. I can never recommend Yoshinaga highly enough to people.
Yes.
And with that, I think we should move on to number 2. Your number 2.
My number 2. My number 1 and my number 2. I always talk about as being my number 1 and my number 2. So, anybody who watches my channel or follows me on Twitter or anything already knows what they are, but that's okay. Any excuse I can get to gush about them. Well, just great.
That's why we're here. You know, that's the aim of the game.
So, number 2 for me is just like for you, Oku, and Fumi Yoshinaga, this is sort of representative of the creator as a whole, all of her stuff, but this is my favorite of her works. But really, you can slot all of the stuff I've read from her, like, in here, in between number 2 and 3. This is The Heart of Thomas by Motohagio.
Mm.
This is also representative of my deep abiding passion for sparkly, beautiful, over-the-top 70s shoujo manga. So excited to see those Rose of Versailles covers.
Oh, they're so beautiful. Just made my week.
Wait.
And with Po-clan coming out soon, is going to be a good year.
Yeah. Oh my god, my heart. My shoujo loving heart. My god, you can say you love shoujo manga, but until you've read shoujo manga from the 70s, man, you don't know what shoujo can be. It's like, just like punching you in the face over and over. Shoujo. Just the pure, raw emotionality of it is incredible.
Certainly is incomparable to anything else. Now or then.
Yeah, it's so The Heart of Thomas is out of print from Fantagraphics, but it's the kind of out of print where one day it'll be $200 and the next day it'll be $5. So see if you can catch it on a good day, and you might just find it for a good price.
Yeah, put on the price trackers or the alerts so you can get a good deal.
Let the internet tell you when to buy The Heart of Thomas. It is periodically really cheap. I don't know why. But this is the story of the suicide of a boy named Thomas Werner in a early 20th century German boarding school setting. This boy named Thomas takes his own life, and before doing so, he sends a letter to his upperclassman, the prefect, Yuli, and the letter says, Dear Yuli, this is my heart. This is my love. This is the sound of my heart. Surely you must understand. So Yuli reads this letter and immediately realizes that Thomas's death was a suicide, and basically has to deal with the fallout of that and figuring out why on earth this kid essentially took his own life for Yuli's sake. And it's also a mystery surrounding Yuli himself. He's a very cold and distant person, and a lot of the story is figuring out why he became that way. And yeah, it's just describing what it's about does not describe the experience of reading this series at all. Mm-hmm. The thing about 70s shoujo manga, and in particular the works of the Year 24 group, who, I don't know, maybe we should do a show on them or something.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with Versailles coming out, we definitely should.
Yeah! Oh my gosh!
Okay, well, that's planned for the future. It's set in stone. We gotta do it.
Ray just over here, suddenly, spontaneously combusts. Yeah, so the Year 24 group is a group of female mangaka in the 70s who sort of revolutionized shoujo manga and how it was made and the types of stories that were told in it.
And how it was perceived as well.
How it was perceived. They're definitely sort of the precursors to josei manga as well. The first sex scene ever to be portrayed in a shoujo manga was actually Kazetoki no Uta, and it's between two boys. Fun fact. So there's so much cool history to just shoujo culture and shoujo novels turning into shoujo manga, and their relationship to queerness and girlhood, and this is all the crap I wrote my thesis about. But,
yeah, there's a lot. I mean, obviously, it's something both you and I are very passionate about. For anyone listening, there's a lot of very good academic literature on all of this stuff, readily available. It's a really, really interesting topic, and even if you're not really a fan of shoujo manga, especially modern shoujo manga, you should still be aware of this, because they establish so many things that are just part of manga now that you need to know. If you're a fan, I think it's important that you understand the history of what you're reading, enjoying, because a lot of it does come from shoujo manga, and especially the Year 24 group. They're just incredible women.
Yep. Yes. As well as their editor, Junya Yamamoto, who is not a woman, but still a pretty incredible figure in the history of shoujo manga. The thing about especially Year 24 works from the 70s, but really any shoujo manga from that era, is just the way that it just sweeps you off your feet when you read it. The Year 24 group definitely were very experimental with their usage of panels and layouts. So whereas a shonen manga really needs to portray, above all, the sequence of an action, and so therefore will often use, these very sort of standard boxed panels to be like, okay, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened.
Then he punched the guy, and then the guy fell over.
Yeah, exactly. Or, the cops were interrogating this guy, and then the guy answered. But shoujo manga, if you sit back and think about what shoujo manga is typically trying to accomplish, I think a lot of those creators realized that wasn't the number one priority. And you can read this in a lot of Hagio and Keiko Takemiya interviews. But the priority in shoujo manga, more often than not, is to convey the psychological states and emotions of the characters above all else. And the Year 24 group took this to its extreme. They often completely forego panel borders at all, or they change them into these crazy shapes. There's this thing Takemiya always does. You see this in Swan as well, is really known for this. Like, showing the entire arc of emotion in this almost Zoetrope-like effect, where it goes from the beginning of the motion to the end, instead of just, like, the beginning of the motion and then the action shot where, the fist is completely out, like, punching the guy. Instead, choosing to just, like, straight up draw the entire thing. Like a string of paper dolls.
Yeah.
And I think that almost, like, of course in Swan it has the effect of portraying the beauty and grace of ballet, but when Hagio or Takemiya does it, I find that it conveys this sense of dramatic slow motion, which is really cool. They can do that, like, in a book, in a drawing. That's really neat. And there's, Hagio is, like, she's really big on, like, surrealism and these weird extended metaphors, and I think if you read Zankoku no Kamigashi Haisuru from the 80s, or Otherworld Barbara from the 2000s, those are two series where she, like, just, like, dives head in on the just, like, complicated-ass extended metaphors. But The Heart of Thomas is almost like a fledgling work in that term, where there'll be a couple, like, dream sequences. There's one in particular where Yuli is dreaming of Thomas jumping off the bridge onto the railroad tracks, and he lands in Yuli's arms and explodes into roses, which is just a beautiful, beautiful image. But for the most part, the surrealism comes into the story, I think, just through the way the story is told. We never really know, like, I guess we know Oscar's family situation, Eric's a little bit, but it's like, this school exists almost in another plane.
Yeah, it's a little pocket, a little bubble that's just self-contained, that, all of this is happening in, that the outside world doesn't play into it until a little bit later.
Yeah, and it's that itself is very surreal. It feels like you're reading a dream. Oh, it's so beautiful, and it's so unlike anything else. I think you should read every book by Moto Hagio.
Yep.
And I think you should read this one too.
Yeah, hunt them down. She does have quite a few works. Not necessarily readily available. Ray obviously mentioned that this particular book is quite hard to find. I have a copy. I've helped other people find copies because it is something that people want, but I don't. Yep. It is a Fantagraphics book, so it's on the pricier end. It's beautiful for what it is. It's absolutely worth the money, but I think that scares off people who aren't familiar with Hagio's work.
And the fact that it is proto BL.
Yeah.
All of the characters are male, with the exception of some mother figures who,
Mm-hmm.
like, they're more metaphorical than anything. Which I'm gonna go ahead and say that does not change through Hagio's work. She's got issues with moms. Because she's got issues with her mom. But
if you haven't read, or if you have read Heart of Thomas, track down Otherworld Barbara. That's also been put out by Fantagraphics Books. That's currently in print. It's wonderful. We mentioned the Poe clan that is coming up from Fantagraphics, and really exciting.
That one is from the 70s. It's just as beautiful and sparkly and kira kira as the Heart of Thomas, and it's about vampires.
Yes.
So that's exciting.
One of Ray's largest biases. One of the things she absolutely looks for.
Yep.
She's also had a couple things put out a long time ago, back in the 90s, by Viz. A Prime is hard to find, but if there are copies floating around there. The even more hard to find one is the anthology that she was part of, which was 4 shoujo stories, which contains one of her better, like one of my favorite ones of her one-shots, which is They Were 11. That is very hard to find. So I do hope we find
that series. I do not actually own 4 shoujo stories, but I do own that particular story in singles. So if you are having trouble finding the elusive, kind of illegally published 4 shoujo stories, try tracking down the singles. They're still difficult to find, but they're a little easier to find than that book.
Yes, and if you are absolutely there's also her collection of stories and other Fantagraphics books, The Drunken Dream and Other Stories, or A Drunken Dream and Other Stories. That one,
which is also great.
It's also great. Also out of print, I believe. I don't know. I think that one's gone in and out of print for a little bit, but I think
that's another one that is like, it doesn't vary as wildly as the Heart of Thomas tends to, but like on a bad day you'll find it for $100, and on a good day you'll find it for 20. So
yeah, and
I would recommend just like keeping your shop taggers or whatever on it and just being persistent.
Yeah, and that one's worth buying, even just for Iguana Girl and Hanshin Half God. But it is a collection of different stories. They're all fantastic throughout the entirety of her career. You know, from the beginning all the way up until what was then current, which was about 2008-ish. And if you're really desperate, and if you're a fan of the Parasite franchise, she does have a one-shot in the Neo Parasite M anthology. It's the first one in that book. It is the best one in that book.
It is the best. It's the best story in that book by a country fucking mile.
It is so good, and I own both those anthologies. I do not own Parasite anymore. It's fine. I like it, but
I'm more interested in what other people do with the world of Parasite than I am in Parasite.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think there's 1 or 2 female creators in that one, but Near Parasite F is entirely female creators. And that has some great mangaka in there as well. No Hagio, but check it out. But M
is worth it for Hagio, but F is, I think, the better of the 2 anthologies.
Yes.
In terms of consistency. They're both kind of hit or miss, but like M has some stories that like made me want to throw the book into a fire. So
the one by the prison school guy, and what was the other one? I can't remember. It's been a while since I read that.
And then Hiro Mashima just like puts his own stupid fairy tale characters in Parasite. Like, how full of yourself are you?
Well, yes, but Hagio, great. She's great in that book. She's great in all of her books. I do hope we see more of her stuff come out. Probably it will come out
this year.
Yeah.
This year is the 50th anniversary of her manga career, so we are getting all kinds of new releases in Japan.
Yay!
Of her stuff. So one can hope that maybe local hero Rachel Thorne can wrestle a couple of those into English availability. We'll see.
Yeah, she is amazing. Hopefully, if Pokemon does well, guys, please buy it. Please support it.
Please.
Hopefully we'll see more of her work, and not just her work, but more 24 group work, because there's so much to enjoy.
Buy the Rose of Versailles too.
Yes, please.
Please, oh my god.
It's been
just like, I want Takemiya back in print.
Yes.
I want Yumiko Oshima in English. I want Yoko Yamagishi in English. I want you all to please buy classic shoujo and share the love. It's my deepest wish.
And with that,
anyway.
I think I'll head into my number 2, which is also a shoujo manga, a lot more recent than Heart of Thomas, but no less beloved by myself, and I would say probably you as well, Ray, and that is Natsume's Book of Friends. Yeah, this is by Yuki Midorikawa. It's an ongoing series, and again, you'll see a lot of similar themes, crossovers. I have very particular tastes amongst my favorites. There's definitely a trend going on here, but this is the story of a teenage boy, Natsume Takashi, who can see yokai, can see spirits, ayakashi, whatever you want to call them. And so he can see them, other people can't, and this has left him to be bounced between various families throughout his childhood. He was orphaned at a very young age, and so all of his relatives who took him in didn't really understand him because he'd react to nothing. They think he'd be acting out, wanting attention, misbehaving, and so they just didn't want him. And so unfortunately this poor boy, who is the sweetest child, has been very systematically abused by a lot of various family members, both near and distant. Everyone. He's gone through every relative he has, pretty much. But he's found himself now living with a couple called the Fujiwaras in the country, very different to where he's been previously. Generally, all of his homes have been in the city, and he's never really reacted well to the yokai who would interact with him there. He didn't really understand them. And so now he's living in the country with the Fujiwaras, who are just wonderful people, absolutely accepting of him and willing to give him the space he needs to sort himself out, to figure himself out, and to heal and to grow. Amidst all of this, he goes through all of the things that he has been left by his maternal grandmother. She died also very young, but he finds out that she was also able to see spirits. So he has this connection to her through just that, but she leaves him this item, this book called the Book of Friends, which is full of various yokai's names. And within this area that he's now living in, that she previously lived there as well. So a lot of the yokai names are from that area. So a lot of the yokai come to try and get their names back, or they want to steal the book so they can have the power over the names in that book. And it's such a wonderful series. This is one that I can recommend for anyone to read, whether you're 9 years old or 99 years old. It really has a very broad general appeal. It's a very emotionally genuine, and although it is like with Mushishi, it is quite episodic. Each chapter is fairly self-contained. There is also this overarching growth of the character. The anime for this is fantastic. Again, another one where I was introduced to it through the anime first. But at 22 volumes currently, it just continues to be consistently fantastic throughout the entirety of it. The way you can read the story can be... It's really interesting to see how Natsume not only builds relationships with the people in his life, the Fujiwaras, his friends and classmates, and also people from his past, but also how he's interacting with yokai and starting to build a proper relationship and a proper understanding with them as well. His companion, his loyal bodyguard, Nyanko Sensei, is wonderful and just the perfect type of comedic relief that the story needs, but it also gives Natsume sort of a, I guess, almost father figure or older brother figure who does look after him, and you can tell how much both of them rely on each other and care about each other. The obviously, like with a lot of stories about being able to see yokai and spirits, and because of Natsume being bounced around between different houses in his childhood, being fostered by different people, there's this element of how people treat children in similar situations, kids who do act out or don't behave the way they expect, kids who are in bad situations, who may be suffering from mental health issues or may just have a bad upbringing, and how a lot of people don't have the patience to embrace that and to provide like support and stability that those people need, which is really what, you know, Natsume has always wanted. He's always been looking for love, for friendship, for acceptance, and it's only now when he's, you know, 16, 17 that he's found it in this new town with his new family, with his new friends. It's also nice in this particular series that he does have friends who are just normal humans who just see him as a normal person, don't know anything about his yokai life, but then he also has friends who do know about that aspect of him and are okay with it and want to support him in that. And so he's getting validation for the first time from all sides. It's really, really, really wonderful. Again, with this character, you see, although there's less passage of time, as it were, in this story, there's still a clear change in Natsume of the beginning to Natsume of current day. If you watch the anime, season 1, episode 1, Natsume is an almost entirely different being to season 4, episode 12. There's so much character growth that goes on with him, and how much he's changed, and how much he's been able to forgive himself and accept parts of himself as well. It's just masterfully done. And yeah, again, this is one that I recommend to a lot of people. It's a shoujo that has very broad appeal. It doesn't have any romance, so if you're not a fan of romance, but you're wanting to try shoujo, try this one. There is so much good in this story, and again, nobody I know who has tried it has disliked it.
Yeah, it's just I love Natsume too. I think it's Iyashike, like healing genre, like in the truest sense. I have cried so many cathartic tears watching this.
Yeah.
Not even, like, I cry for the sad stories too, but, like, I cry for the happy stories too. This series, there's so much hope and so much just emphasis on the importance of human connection and respecting and empathizing with other people who are different from you, which, you know, is something that I've been finding myself wanting to read about more and more lately. It's like a rainy day, like clearing away.
And empathy is such an important thing to have. It's such an important characteristic and such an important thing to keep in mind when you are interacting with other people. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't see kindness and empathy and acceptance as traits that you want to inherently have or to project or to give. It's more so this idea of trying to, you know, be cool. I'm a badass, or I can do this, and I don't care about other people. And that, I mean, that's maybe inherently cynical of me, but we do need more and more media that portrays that. It's very hard not to feel an emotional connection to a character like Natsume, who is so genuine.
And I think, like, especially in his interactions with the exorcists,
Natori,
we really see, like, how much his sense of empathy is his strength. The fact that a character like Natori would just be like, you shouldn't get close to yokai, you should just kill them. And then Natsume's like,
no, I don't want to.
But he's sad.
He's my friend now.
How could you even say that? Yeah, like so often, like so many of these yokai have been so hurt by his grandmother, who was hurting them because, you know, she in turn was being hurt by others.
Yeah, she was wanting to build connections with anybody who would accept her and who wouldn't be afraid of her.
And like, because she only knew like toxic relationships, she ended up being toxic towards the yokai in her life as well. And there's some stuff about cycles of abuse in there.
Yeah.
So many of these yokai like reach out to Natsume feeling hurt. Like a lot of times they confuse him for Reiko, his grandmother, and lash out at him. But it's through him just being like, okay, let's sit down and I'll listen, that he's able to actually help them and heal them and come out of it alive. I mean,
that's always a plus. When you can get out of a situation alive.
I love the yokai. They're so childlike.
Yeah.
In a way that's truly charming. Like, not cloying at all. It feels very much like a kid on the playground who just needs a friend.
Yeah, there's a simple straightforwardness to the yokai that I think helps Natsume be able to attach himself to them more readily, because very often they don't have any other schemes. They're not trying to do much outside of what they say, or if they are, they're very obvious about it and you're not going to get tricked by it. They're very direct, and they are, like you said, very childlike in that they just want what they want to happen. Like that's all. They don't care about anything else. They just want their name back, or they want their bell, or they want him to help them find a feather or whatever. That's all they need, and they're happy.
This person has been coming to see me at this bus stop every day for the last 20 years. And suddenly they just stopped coming. So I've just come here every day. But I don't know what's happened to them. That's the one that got my friends.
Oh, God.
When I showed them the show, they were bawling by the end of that episode.
Oh, man. There are some rough chapters in Natsume. I am currently doing a, manga challenge on Instagram. And one of the daily challenges was a backstory that hit you hardest. And my choice is Natsume, because honestly, it's never outright said what's happened to him, but what isn't implied and what is alluded to is very obvious. The fact that in middle school he couldn't get a haircut or wouldn't have a haircut. The fact that when he had problems at school, the people who'd pick him up would be yelling and shouting and smelling like smoke and just not even, interacting with him, and he'd just be standing there quiet looking at the ground. The fact that, when there's an episode / chapter when he's going back to his childhood home, and he before that oh God, but before that he runs into a family who had previously homed him, and they're very welcoming to him, and they're quite ready to have him back. They're like, we understand, you had troubles and we're sorry that it didn't work out. They weren't, necessarily the worst of the people he stayed with. There's a scene in there where, because he goes missing for a period of time, and then once he's brought back to the house, the girl, his cousin or whatever, who he's living with, she's like, just go back home, you don't belong here, my parents care more about you, that's not fair, blah blah blah. And he runs away, runs out of the garden and just calling for his dad, calling for someone he knows won't be able to respond, and that's just, I'm like already getting choked up. It's so sad. Oh my god. And now for the Instagram challenge, I was looking for that, but I couldn't find it because the chapters are a bit like, oh, you just gotta try and find something. But I found the chapter where the Fujiwaras bring Natsume, or meet Natsume for the first time, and bring him home to them from Toko's perspective. And it's just so incredibly powerful to be able to see that element of both of them, both the Fujiwaras and both Natsume, finding each other, because they really were in the perfect situation for each other, able to provide the things that they themselves were missing. It's I
love that the Fujiwaras are willing to meet him where he is.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
Like, that's so important. They know that there's something going on with him that he's not ready to tell them yet, and they don't pressure him. They just are kind and are like, if there's ever anything you need to tell us, you can. And let him open up to them at his own pace. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, it's really a show of trust. Natsume never had that before. People didn't trust him. They assumed he was a bad kid. They assumed he was acting out, and they assumed he was just trouble. So a lot of people wouldn't trust a kid like that. And the fact that he is...
Yeah. I mean, the Fujiwaras is like, one day he just brings home the ugliest fucking cat on the entire planet, and they're like,
okay, we have a cat
cool,
now.
We have a cat now. I would be like, where did you find that thing?
Okay, it's okay. You
that can cursed entity.
Yeah,
Nyanko Sensei is so good.
He's so good.
If anyone tries to tell you that there's another anime mascot character that's better than him,
they are absolutely wrong. Or they haven't watched Natsume.
He is the best. He is peak mascot.
I have a Nyanko plush one of my best friends gave me. And I love him so much. He has pride of place on the top of my shelves and watches over our meal. It's also a plush with the snow bunny on the head, so it like makes me even sadder. I'm like, oh no, that episode. Ah!
Mine has I liked it because it took me so long. I had to find like the perfect Nyanko plush. And I had to find it for a price that wasn't like $40. You know what I'm saying? So I found one at like this like hole in the wall, like used anime goods shop in Osaka, I think. And it was a pain hauling it home, but it was worth it. 'Cause it was, instead of his anime design, it was actually his manga design, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
And then it has him wearing like a little kimono, like over his shoulders. And I thought that matched perfectly with my Natsume figure, which has him in a special kimono. So yeah. Happy endings to anime goods. Treasure
That's
hunt.
the good thing about Natsume as well, though, because it is very popular in Japan. Not so much in the West, but out in Japan it's very popular. So it has popular. 6 anime seasons plus OVAs plus a film that came out. It has a bunch of merch, always merch coming out.
Yes.
And so
if you've ever wanted anything with Nyanko Sensei's face on it,
you can get it. It's available.
You can get it. They made a teapot. That was really cute. What's cool about it too is that like every class I've been in, if I say I like Natsume Yuji, there are always kids who are like, oh, I like that too. Like from elementary school 1st grade to middle school 3rd grade, I've like every single class, no matter the age of the kids, there have been kids in that class who are like, I love Natsume. So.
Yeah, it's for everyone. My mother, she doesn't watch too much anime, but she's seen Natsume and it's probably her favorite. She just loves that show so much, and I knew she would because it's the type of thing she enjoys. And it's the type that you can show your grandma and say, Grandma, I know, because your grandma's like, I've heard you like those Chinese cartoons, and you're like, yeah, grandma, do you want to watch one? And you can show her this, and it's not going to be too weird or too violent or too sexual. It's just perfect.
My grandma's too literary for that, but what is this witchcraft? All right.
Number 1.
So, number 1. Drum roll. It's Fruits Basket.
Yay!
It was always going to be Fruits Basket. There is nothing in my life other than Fruits Basket. Yeah, so with the new anime, my Twitter is basically just a Fruits Basket page at this point. I only talk about Fruits Basket, and I only ever want to talk about Fruits Basket. Yeah, it's, I've told this story before in various videos, but this was my first manga, not counting, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was really little. Even though it was, like, written from right to left, I just thought that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was, like, a special kind of comic book. If you read from right to left, I didn't consciously know that it was from Japan, so it doesn't really count, I don't think. Yeah, like, the first manga that I knew was manga that I read was Fruits Basket and Plus Anima, which is a fine little series.
Yeah, solid little shonen. Is that shonen? I think so.
Yeah, it's very cute. It's about a little crow boy.
Yeah. It's kind of like,
and like
a weird Animorphs-esque type of series.
Yeah. I was gonna say Animorphs. I didn't want to, but I didn't say it. She said it. Yeah, it's cute. But needless to say, it did not stick with me the way that Fruits Basket did. Fruits Basket came to me during a very dark time in my life. I think that middle school is hard for anybody. But I was going through some stuff, and I think it's fair to say that Fruits Basket, and particularly the character arc of one of the main characters, Yuki, saved my life. Like, I don't know if I would be here without Fruits Basket. So there's no way that it would not be number 1 on my list. And The Heart of Thomas I have a similarly personal connection to, but yeah, it's like, that's why those are, like, cemented in spot number 1 and number 2, and then the other 3 are just like, let's just slot in any of my children, it's fine. But these 2 are like, no, these are my 2 favorite ones because I have very strong personal ties to them. But Fruits Basket, I think, like, honestly, every time I read it, it just gets better.
Yeah.
I think it's just a very, very well put together series. It's incredible that it exists because it's like, I've read Takaya's stuff. I haven't finished Twinkle Stars, so that's another one that's in my
yeah, I need to read that
American collection.
I need to read that one too. It's up there. I'm wanting to finish it.
So I can't give my opinions on Twinkle Stars, but I like Lise a lot. I liked the first episode, or the first 2 volumes of Twinkle Stars, and then I don't like anything that she's done before Fruits Basket. I don't like those with wings. I don't like Phantom Dream. To me, they're just mediocre shoujo from the 90s.
Yeah.
It's so weird to see her just so suddenly and so completely find her footing with Fruits Basket. And just, like, make this thing that's just, like, a masterpiece. And then say in interviews, like, I don't think I'm ever going to make anything that good ever again. You know what? You're probably right. Like, I like Lisa a lot. I think it's cute. But it's like, Fruits Basket is it, honestly. That's your magnum opus. That's your heart and soul right there. You did it. It's such a weird phenomenon of a series. If you don't know the plot of the series, it's about a girl named Toru Honda who is being raised by a single mother, and when her mother dies in a car crash, she decides, well, she moves in with her grandfather, and then when her grandfather is going to renovate the house or something, he's like, can you go stay with a friend for a few months? And instead of imposing on one of her literally two friends, Toru, bless her heart, decides that she is gonna be on her own one day, so it may as well start from today. So she buys a tent at the discount store and goes to live alone in the woods.
Always the first choice.
In the outskirts of Tokyo. And one day when she's exploring the area around her tent, she comes across a house and learns that this forest she's been trespassing on is in fact private property owned by a huge local estate, the Soma family, and particularly owned by Shigure Soma, who is the cousin of the most popular boy in school, Yuki. And various things happen. They find out that she's living in a tent in their woods, and they're like, look, you can stay in our place. We've got a spare room. Please don't do this to yourself. And she ends up living with Shigure, Yuki, and a hot-tempered third member of the family, Kyo, who literally crashes into the house at a point early in the series. And in doing so, she learns that the Soma family has a terrible secret. Certain members of the Soma family are possessed by the spirits of the Chinese zodiac. And when hugged by a person of the opposite sex, or when their bodies become weak or sick, they transform into their animal. So Yuki is the rat, Shigure is the dog, and Kyo is the cat who was left out of the zodiac. That sounds like a really wacky premise, but it gets deep from there, man.
Yeah.
It's all about abusive family dynamics. It's sort of a brutal takedown of the Japanese patriarchal family system and the Japanese nuclear family. It's about found family and how the people who really love you and who are really there for you are your real family. You know, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb and all that. And the curse, of course, leads to a lot of wacky encounters with cute baby animals, but more than anything, it's a metaphor for family, it's a metaphor for her adolescence, it's a metaphor for everything that holds kids back from becoming everything that they were always meant to be. And it's a beautiful story about coming of age and coming into yourself despite all the forces trying to stop you from doing that, and the people who help you forward and the people who pull you back. And it's great. It's great. I mean, it was the most popular manga in America for a long time. Quite a few years back when I was in middle and high school. And for good reason. It's great.
Yeah.
And you should
watch the new season.
Buy it from Yen Press and watch the new anime.
Not so much the old anime. Though it's fine, but like comparatively it's nothing.
I mean, if you're big on that Akitaro Daichi style of comedy, it's full of it. But maybe watch Kami-sama Kiss instead. I think his style fit that manga better. Or Bludgeoning Angel.
Oh god, that show. That certainly was a show. Goodness. So, yeah, obviously Fruits Basket, hugely popular. I don't think it really needs an introduction because so many people do have nostalgia either for the manga or for the older anime. We've seen how popular it is with this new rebooted anime, and the fact that they've gotten pretty much the entirety of the original English voice cast back for the dub. It's just iconic within a lot of fans, a lot of Western fans, a lot of people who've followed the series for a long time, who grew up with the manga either in their libraries, always touted as one of the best. It's been a perennial favorite. Fans of our generation and older, like myself, I didn't start reading manga until I was later on in life, so I didn't read it when I was in middle school, when I was in this position where a lot of these kids are. But I don't think you need to necessarily be in that position to enjoy this series. And I think there's so much that the story provides, that these characters can teach you as a reader, but each other as well, that is very important for individuals to hear, whether it be in childhood, or when you're preteen or early teen, or even up into adulthood. There's a lot of very powerful messages about, like you said, found family, of surviving parts of your life that you don't have a choice in, but you can still change, and there is hope for the future. There's so much to it that, 23 volumes long. It's quite long for a shoujo, and it
uses every single
absolutely
page.
Like there's nothing in there that could be cut out.
If you were willing to, there's a couple Zodiac members who don't get the limelight that maybe they deserved. So like, if you were being really strict, you could chop them out, but then you don't get the whole Zodiac,
and
so.
I don't want to miss out. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm a rooster, and the rooster doesn't show up till the very end. I was like, where's the rooster? But
Kurino is pivotal.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like but I feel like that might have been a character that could have been cut out, like if you were being super strict about it.
No.
I feel like
I think that he's like, you can't.
He's crucial, but I feel
so
like because of how small a part, like actual screen time, quote unquote, he gets, that people could be like, oh well, you don't really need him, because
you need him as a contrast to Toru and to Shigure.
Yeah, you do, but there's also, another character.
I'm thinking more like Ritsu is kind of like...
I love Ritsu, though.
I love Ritsu, but he has like one chapter and then he just kind of goes off on his own.
But he's a cute monkey, and I love him.
He is a monkey. Oh my god, the new design.
He's so cute!
With his little monkey hands. Oh my god. I can't wait for that little monkey hand fan service. I desperately
little
want
monkey
it.
hand, little monkey foot, little monkey nose.
His little monkey feet.
I love it.
His little monkey tail.
I love it so much. And the tiger, little tiger paws,
her little tiger,
little sheep, I just want to kiss them and cuddle them. Oh, it's so cute.
They're so cute. I'm like, to clarify, in the original manga, none of the animals are drawn with toes, and me and G are both extremely passionate about the anime's extremely important inclusion of
baby toes,
little animal toes. In particular, Yuki's little rat toes are so important to me.
He's such a sassy little adorable rat. I love him. Oh.
He's never had little toes before. Rats? Okay. Rats' little, like, hands are the ultimate charm point.
They are. They actually are. They're adorable. I love rats. If they're wild rats, I don't want them in my house. But pet rats are amazing. I love them. Rodents are great.
They're so cute.
But,
like, rats, mice, hamsters, guinea pigs all have the most adorable little hands.
So cute.
And when they put their little hands on your hand... that is equivalent to meeting God.
I personally have never had a rodent. My mother does not approve of rodent pets in Australia.
Aww.
In Australia, she likes them, but she doesn't want them to like get out and have babies, right? Because they're a pest. And they
yeah. We have an entire prairie dog town, like in my parents' backyard, and they carry the plague, so I can relate.
Yeah, no, we had a rat in our house earlier this year. We tried so many things. Oof. We tried so many things to catch it. We finally killed it. It was rat sack, so poison, and peanut butter just mixed together. It it ate everything overnight. Like, we put out 6 or 7, it just ate it. And it obviously went somewhere to die. It didn't die in the house because it doesn't smell. So I don't know where it went, where it is.
Oh, Lord.
But thank goodness it did not die in the house. But oh my God, we were chasing that rat for weeks, I swear. But
you need a Yuki because he can talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love rats. If it was my pet, I love it, but I don't want them wild ones in my house. No, thank you.
No wild ones.
I don't want them.
It'd be fine. It'd be fine if they didn't carry disease.
Or just eat everything and poop everywhere and chew through wires.
And poop everywhere.
Ugh.
But it's okay. Yuki is a domesticated rat.
He's a good rat. He can control the wild ones as well.
He's a good rat.
He's okay.
He can control the wild ones, save people's precious cargo in a landslide with his rat friends.
Speaking of the anime, speaking of Yuki and his design and his little rat fingers, episode 15, which was not this most current episode, but last week's episode, when he was
the summer house.
Yes, when they're in the summer house, when he's on the branch, just like standing there with his little hands on his hips, I tried to get a screenshot of that so much because that's an iconic look. I love that. That's amazing.
Oh my God,
Yuki.
He's got so many iconic looks. Like, he could be a drag queen with his sass. He's got a poison tongue, that boy.
Yeah.
What I like, being serious a little bit, what I like about his development as a character, because, something to know about Fruits Basket going in is that the 3 main characters, the personalities that you see from them at the beginning of the series are 700% coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
Toru, Kyo, Yuki have all been through very severe trauma that we have only just started to see the barest corner of, and they are gonna have to go through a big storm in order to become fully human, honestly. Hence the animal metaphor.
My God, it's like it was planned.
Oh my God. Yuki in particular, what I like about him is that at the start, a lot of people call him boring because he's very sort of generically nice.
Yeah.
Like, he's very blandly polite to everyone he meets. And to Toru, one of the big things with him is that he does not call her by her first name.
Yeah. At
all. He calls her Honda-san, Honda-san, Honda-san. Even though they live in the same goddamn house. And when she calls him by his first name for the first time, he's so surprised he turns into a rat. He's got some issues with closeness.
Yeah.
But what I like is that as we see him sort of open the lid on his emotions and his true self more and more, it's not like he's a bad person, but, he's kind of a bitch. He's not the nicest person in the world. He's kind of a jerk, and I appreciate that. I like that. Him starting out as, this perfect prince, and then you get his real personality, and he's he's kind of a pain in the ass. I appreciate the realism there. It's nice.
Also, as a character, sort of going back to the new anime as well, I really appreciate, we've talked about this privately, but I really appreciate the casting choices, and I think that Nobunaga Shimazaki is just, the perfect choice for him. He's so good. He's so good. For people who don't really follow Seiyu, Shimazaki is mostly known for Haruka Nanase from Free. He was also Eugeo in the most recent Sword Art Online version. He's in a lot of stuff. I like him in a lot of stuff, but Yuki is, I think he was such a great choice because, like with Haru from Free, he's a very complicated character and a very emotional character, but he does have this distance between him and a lot of the other characters, and this sort of cool exterior.
Yeah, like the way that he, like, you know, he'll nail it for the comedy, and he'll nail that sort of deadpan tone.
Yeah.
But it's like, then you get, like, that one line where he, like,
puts his
lets
whole
the cracks show just a little bit.
Puts his whole heart and soul
like,
into
perfect.
it. Yeah, he's again, that's why, like, going to Free, like, he's so good in that series. A lot of people, when you watch the first season especially, it's like, okay, he's just like the cool guy, he's just deadpan, he doesn't really do much.
He's in love with a waterfall.
Yeah, he's, you know, he's kind of like the weird quirky dude, but he's sort of the main character, and you're like, all right. And then it gets to, like, further into that series and further into the franchise as a whole, and you see more and more of his actual emotions pulling through and the various situations between all of the characters. And there's so much that he's able to capture with his voice that is just incredible. There's so much nuance to a character that seems at first glance very, like, one note, very, you know, okay, I know what this guy's about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Kyo is that Yuma Uchida? Am I crazy?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Ash Lynx.
Yes.
I was absolutely blown away by his performance as Ash.
Yeah.
So, like, the second I heard him as Kyo, I was like, that's perfect casting. Kyo hasn't really gotten the chance to shine yet, but y'all just wait until the end of this season. Y'all just wait. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, he's great. And again, so much versatility with his voice, so much that can be captured. He's also currently, for people who follow, like, anime as it comes out, he's in Given. He's one of the main characters in Given. I think he was one of the main characters in I Want to Eat Your Pancreas as well, that film. So all of these actors have done a lot. They're very well established, say, and I'm glad that they were able to find people to so perfectly capture the character of these characters.
My god, I could talk about all of them. Like, Megumi Han did so good as Momiji.
My girl, I love her.
14, was it?
Yeah.
She, like, you could almost hear her, like, choking up in the booth. She was doing such a good job. Like, she gets so into her roles, and you can see her, like, talking about it so passionately on Twitter after every episode.
Yeah.
She was gone.
Yeah.
If you don't know.
And
so that's her big role.
After every episode of Hunter x Hunter 2011, you know, when she was gone, she would do the same thing, and you can see how much her characters mean to her.
And, like, when she tweeted about, like, after 3 years of Hunter x Hunter, like, every single week going to the same building, she was just like, I was just crying, thinking that next week I won't go back.
Yeah.
She's so good. I love that she's, like, I was expecting her to basically do Gon's voice for Momiji, but I feel like she's found a unique timbre for him that works really well, because they are obviously very different characters.
Yeah. Very.
It's, you know, they're both, like, cute little boy characters, but, like, Gon's, like, the shonen protagonist who's always shouting, and Momiji is, like, this very effeminate little half German boy. So
bunny rabbit,
little bunny, little bun. And then Takahiro Sakurai as Ayame.
Oh, he's so good.
So good. So different from the approach that they took in the first anime, but, like, just as good. Like, he's so good. He's just so distinguished.
Yeah, Ayame is honestly, like, one of my favorite characters, and he just nailed it.
Love him.
He's
so good.
So good.
He's so good. Oh my gosh. I was like, at the Summer House episode, they were like, you know, Shigure is like, we need someone to liven up this place. I know, let's call Aya. And they're like, no. If you do that, I will kill you. And I'm like here in the audience, like, yeah, let's call Aya.
Heck yeah, let's make this a party.
Dude, he's a whole party in one person. I get why Yuki doesn't appreciate him yet. Because honestly, when I was Yuki's age, I didn't appreciate that kind of person either. And I thought Ayame was annoying, but now I'm like,
you have learned.
Heck yeah, let's call Aya.
Every friend group needs one of them. You need someone like that.
Yep.
And I love the antics he has with Shigure as well. Just their whole banter every time.
I love his extremely obvious crush on Haku.
Oh, well, yeah, that as
and
well,
I
of course.
Extremely appreciate. So we've got, everyone in the cast of Fruits Basket is metatextually bisexual. Speaking as a bi. But there's two characters in particular who are canonically bisexual, and this series is deeply, profoundly heteronormative and cisnormative in some very annoying ways. But it's also a series that is very important to a lot of queer people that I know. Yeah, there are two characters who are canonically bisexual, and they are Ayame and Haru. It's not, like, hugely important to the plot or anything.
But it's still good to have.
It's still nice. I love that they've really been playing up Haru's crush on Yuki.
Some good stuff there. Good food for me.
Especially in the voice acting. Like, in the original, he'd be very deadpan, but in this one, he's like,
Nani, nani.
It's really cute. Hi, Yuki, what's up?
Hey, what's wrong? What can I help you with?
Wakata. Naruhodo. And then he fixes everything.
Of course.
Oh, I love Fruits Basket. Anyway, that's enough of that. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a Fruits Basket.
I'm sure we'll get around to it. I'm sure, definitely at some point.
And it'll just be talking about Seiyu for 2 hours. But what is your favorite manga?
My number one is maybe not a surprise. It's one that I have, I guess, a similar relationship to it as you do with Fruits Basket, and that's why, even though it does have flaws, it really captured everything I needed at that point, and it's just grown to be something that I've loved for the entirety of my career as a manga and anime fan. Again, all of these, I don't think, aside from Oku, every single one of these I've started through the anime, and then went on to the manga. So, there's that. But my number one is Fullmetal Alchemist. For people who've watched my channel for any amount of time, that shouldn't come as a surprise. I talk about it a lot. I have huge respect for Hiromu Arakawa. I adore her other current series, Silver Spoon. There's just a lot that Fullmetal does as a series, just fundamentally, and as a shonen series that goes beyond what I ever expected, and it goes above and beyond so much of its peers within that same demographic. I think it would be hard pressed for people to say that it isn't sort of a modern classic, even if you don't inherently like it or love it. It's something that is very, very well loved. It's very well done, and it's one that a lot of people love and a lot of people value very highly, and for good reason. It's a very, very good series. There are problems, as with all series, but I do think that there's so much in it that I was needing, that I think a lot of people were needing in its various iterations, both the animes, the manga, whatever, that has this universal appeal to it that has made it more so than a lot of the shonen flagships like Bleach or Naruto or even One Piece. And I mean, I hate to compare a series like that, especially because a lot of those series I haven't read. This one, it has such a genuine core to it, and so many messages that are almost the antithesis of a lot of other shonen stories. Again, sort of valuing and placing importance on smaller acts of quietness within the stories, of just plain kindness and hard work more valuable than like a talent or being cool or beating a thing. The amount of respect that Arakawa continues to give almost, if not all, of her characters. They're all on a fairly even playing ground. No character is inherently better than others, even our protagonists. Our protagonists are very flawed people, and that's integral to the story. They have to be flawed and make mistakes, but still be genuinely working towards being better people and trying to fix things. That, you know, you wouldn't have a story without that. I love the relationship that, you know, it focuses on siblings in a positive way, because oh so too often in shonen manga we have sibling rivalries. I really appreciate just how the story is able to weave in this larger idea of, you know, the futility of war and PTSD and the realities, the human cost of giant, you know, being in a war zone, being in a war-torn country, as it were, and being in a very military-focused country, and how it affects the people, not only that were killed in the areas that, you know, are directly affected, but the people on both sides who were affected. And it's not very often you see that in shonen manga, this discussion of PTSD. And also, fundamentally, for all of our main characters is this idea of survival's guilt, and not only forgiving other people, but forgiving yourself and like trying to work towards that. And yeah, like I really, there's a lot of things. I've said this before with, I have a bias to female written shonen because women can write women well, and Arakawa is no different. Her cast of characters, of girls, of women, are wonderful, amazing, diverse, and all have their own motivations to do things outside of our protagonists, which is great.
Olivia can step on me.
She is pretty incredible. But just the fact that, you know, our main, like, I guess, female love interest being Winry, the fact that she's a gearhead, that she's an engineer and interested in medicine and, you know, very, very smart, outside of just being like, oh, I'm pretty and, you know, I'll be waiting for you. Like, she has her own life and she cares about...
I guess she is kind of like the healer.
Yeah, but
like not.
She's the healer in like, okay, the fundamental sense, but at the same time she's like, I'm not gonna wait around for you guys. I've got a career in Rush Valley. I'm doing my own thing. I got my own stuff I want to do. If you guys want to pop in, say hi, that'll be great. Try not to get yourself killed, and it'll be all good.
What I like is just like the variety that you see female soldiers, you see housewives, you see like, you know, Granny Pinako or whatever, and then you have Winry, who's like into engineering, Hawkeye, who's like this hardened soldier, Olivier, who's this like crazy general, who can step on me any day. Izumi is incredible. She's definitely someone who I prefer her arc in the 2003 anime personally, and for me, like, her character, like, it overlaps, like, I forget which parts are in the anime and which parts are in the manga, but Izumi's really great. Yeah.
And also, Trisha, their mother, Edward and Alphonse's mother, is sort of the catalyst to this whole story. Like, it's heartbreaking to me that this whole thing, like, this whole story really started because 2 kids missed their mother. Like, they were grieving and they didn't have that opportunity to grieve properly, and so they made a fairly childish mistake that had very serious consequences. And now, from that, you know, they actually learnt their lesson. They're not trying to do that again. Try to, oh, we failed this time, but we can still bring her back. No, they know that that's impossible. And now they're just trying to rectify their mistake and try to fix their, and pay back the people and help themselves to get back to the point that they were at and to go beyond it. Because it's like, grief is such a huge part of Full Metal. Like, it's not inherently obvious, but there's a lot of points where death and acceptance of death and moving past it, and survivors, you know, the people you leave behind, having to rationalize and deal with that, it's not done in a lot of series well. Definitely not done in a lot of shonen well, where usually someone will die and they'll be back in 3 volumes. It's like, oh, don't worry, I'm dead.
Oh
I'm
God.
not dead, I'm alive.
Tokyo Ghoul and its revolving door of mysterious disappearances.
Yeah, there's a levity to Full Metal Alchemist that I think a lot of other shonen lacks, and a lot of shonen that I enjoy lacks this, but it's something that is such an integral part of life. Like, as a person, as someone who's living, you will never be able to completely avoid death in your life. That's impossible. So to be able to have a story, it tells people that it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to be able to process this and to take the time to, you know, get through it. And if you aren't okay, you know, even years later, that's still okay. Like, that's not something you get a lot of in this type of media, where, especially shonen, it's always a big adventure and positive, and we're gonna be the best in the world and find the thing. And I mean, they're trying to find a thing here, but it's not it's not to the same degree as like One Piece or something.
Well, I think there is very much a reason why people, even like, you know, manga fans who really only consume like the most popular, like One Piece, you know, shonen manga, which is just as valid as any other kind of manga fan, obviously. But even those fans tend to hold Full Metal Alchemist above the rest. Like, it's almost like something that's discussed on another level. And I think that's a testament to just how universal and how lasting the story is. Even as someone who, myself, has the controversial opinion of liking the 2003 anime better than the manga, you can skewer me in the comments, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that anime wouldn't exist without the manga, and, you know, with both of them there's a Full Metal Alchemist for everybody.
Yeah, and for me, because I am a big fan of the original anime. Like, don't get me wrong, that's what I started with. I love it. It's a smaller scale story and a much more intimate, I guess, focus on the 2 brothers and their struggle and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and
that. It's great. Like, internal character stuff is my bread and butter. I adore that. But I also love the grandness that, you know, the manga and the later anime does bring to it. I like how it expanded to a larger world outside of just Amestris and Risenbul and Central, and that we did see characters from other countries. We did meet so many more different people. I enjoy it all. I see, rather than saying like there's one definitive one that I prefer and love, I see it all as very complementary parts of a franchise. I've even read the light novels. I've read, like, believe me, I've done everything Full Metal Alchemist I've pretty much consumed. The light novels aren't great. The 5th one is probably people know because it comes with the manga box set. The Valley of White Petals, which is the 4th one. That has some great Alphonse character stuff. But yeah, these light novels don't go into them being like, oh yeah, it's gonna be like a current light novel, because these are really written for middle schoolers. Like, they're very simple.
They are, yeah. I tried to read through them, I think, in high school, maybe? Like, later high school, they had them, the first couple at my
Yeah.
library, and I just like couldn't.
The first couple
like
are
even
rough.
as someone who goes back and like periodically rereads random Animorphs books, like I couldn't make it through the Full Metal Alchemist ones.
The early ones are. The first one is probably the hardest to get through. I don't know. 3, 4, 5 are very good. The fifth one is, as I said, probably the best, and that's why it's in the box set. And that one deals with cultural identity and racial identity in regards to the Ishvalans and the Amestrans.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how they do that. As I said, the fourth one is very Alphonse focused, which I love him, so that was a plus for me. I can't remember the third one, but I enjoyed it for what it was. But yeah, it's not like high literature. These are definitely written for like 10 to 12-year-olds, which is fine. Like it's fine if you know that's what you're getting. But yeah, overall, like Full Metal Alchemist did something and said something to me that was not only brought me into this whole fandom's not the right word, but this whole community, this whole hobby, because the anime was one of the first ones that I ever saw. It was something that I could continue to go back to and still feel the same things about, and to still feel like it was, even though it was entertainment, even though it was fun and there's funny parts to it and there's scary parts to it or whatever, it still had this part of it that was more. At a point, I was reading shonen, and I still am reading shonen. I'm still reading it. I just haven't found something that spoke to me in the same way that Arakawa was able to speak to me, and I'm sure many people in her audience, through these characters in a way that was like Full Metal Alchemist. Because there's always been stories about, underdog heroes and hero's journey, having to come from humble beginnings and then being able to save the world at the end of it. I liked how, even though that's fundamentally what the story is about, that's not really what the story is about. And I really, really appreciated the ending to the series and how well Arakawa was able to integrate her ending, her conclusion, what she wanted to tell and what she wanted to leave the audience with, the sort of the main thesis and theme of the story. Even in the first chapter, she introduced that and interwove it to even the premise, the inherent physicality of our characters. It's integral to the plot, and you can't, like, if you don't know your end point, if you don't know that's how you're going to end it, you can't put it in the beginning. So that was just such an like one of the best examples of foreshadowing that I'd come across with writing, because a lot of times when I read foreshadowing, like when I read novels, I've read a lot of novels in my day, and a lot of the time I can tell, like, if something's brought up, I'm like, okay, that's how it's gonna end, or like, this is important, of course, like, I know how this is gonna end. And that's not me trying to be a smartass, but I feel like a lot of people don't know how to incorporate that in a proper way and an intriguing way that like hooks your reader in, but also without just like giving away everything as soon as you mention it. So there was that. There was, as I said, these characters who, although, we have our heroes, they're not these, they don't think of themselves as heroes. And that was something that was very interesting to myself. And it made it more appealing to be reading about these characters, because they do see themselves as, if not normal, then just regular people, not inherently better or worse than anyone else.
Even regardless of like their self-perception, it's just the fact that they really do, they feel like kids. They feel like a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old kid who just got sort of caught up in stuff that's way, way over their heads.
Yeah.
And like they're amazing. Like Edward's a genius, Alphonse is this crazy empath, but it's like They're kids, and it feels
and
that way.
and they struggle because of that. Sure, they have the abilities to do things other people can't, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have a toll on them. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect them. And when they're confronted with that, they react in very appropriate ways to their age, to their situation, to their prior experience.
It's like, no, I'm not. I'm an adult.
Okay.
Shut up, brat.
Okay, small child, you go sit over there. So yeah, I've said this before. Fullmetal Alchemist is absolutely a super important series to me. Very much one of my favorite, if not my favorite series. It's one that, again, I think most people can read or watch the anime, although that's a little bit harder now because Aniplex owns the license. But I think both versions are streaming on Netflix. The old one is definitely. I think the newer one is too. And Viz is putting out Viz has 3 million different releases of the manga, so take your pick of which one you want to collect, dependent on your budget. So there's a lot of options for Fullmetal, and it's one that, again, you can understand why so many people love this series, why it's stayed as popular as it has. It's been 10 years since the Brotherhood anime started.
Oh,
yeah. I was in high school when that was starting, which is crazy.
Me too.
And obviously the manga was even before that. But for a story to stay so grounded within the culture, just the otaku culture, this Western fandom, and be so well respected and highly regarded, obviously there's something there. And yeah, for me, it was one that was not only important for various reasons in my life and for various things that I was searching for in media. It's just a solid show. It's one that I think a lot of people can gain a lot from. Whether it be the same things I got from it, it doesn't matter. There's a lot to parse out of that series.
Yep. So both of our number ones go back to our very roots as baby anime fans, and are very close to our hearts, I think we can say.
Yeah.
And both wildly popular. Which is kind of interesting. It's like we go through various levels of popularity in our lists and then end up with something that is universal. And we would love to hear from you guys what your favorite manga is as well, if you've ever been as deeply affected as we were by our number ones, or, whatever you feel like telling us. We would love to hear in the comments below.
Yeah, send us your lists, because it's really interesting to see just how many different series appeal to different people, and the crossover, the differences. There's a lot. Ray and I have very similar, I would say, opinions on things and tastes, and so we were able to talk a lot about all of these series, although our lists aren't, don't really have any crossover.
It's like one title on each of our lists that the other hadn't had familiarity with. We're the same person.
But as similar as we are, our top fives were very different. And that's, that's great. I don't want to be talking to someone who's just like, yep, I have the same thing for the same reasons, and this is why.
I suggested this topic as the start primarily to sort of so you guys could get a feel for our rapport and our tastes and how we like to talk about manga, but also because I had a feeling that, even though a lot of times when we're talking, it's like, oh, you like that? I love that too. I had a feeling when we actually sat down and thought about what pieces of art really truly moved us, we would get to pretty different lists, and that turned out to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. been very good. Always a plus. But thank you guys so much for listening. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are hoping to make this a monthly thing. And going forward, hopefully, schedule should be that it's posted on the third Saturday of the month. That didn't work out for us this month, just to we had technical difficulties the first time, and then unfortunately Ray got second attempt.
This is take two. And somehow we said it was going to be shorter,
it's not.
And it's longer than the first
It's way
time
longer.
We did it. So if you've made it this far, you're a hero.
Thank you for listening to us.
We probably won't be talking about 10 different manga titles at once in future episodes, so that should help with the length, I think.
But it's our grand debut. Might as well do it with a bang. Start it in such a grand way, and in a way that is unfortunately very inherently usual to my channel and my videos. So it should be going forward the third Saturday of the month. As we said, we had difficulties, then Ray got sick, so there's gonna be issues. So apologies in advance, but hopefully this was interesting to you guys. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of insight to who we are and what we enjoy and what we like to talk about.
And we have we have some ideas, I guess, going forward, but certainly if you guys have anything you would like to hear from us, put that in the comments as well. We will take anything into consideration.
That is exactly what I was going to say.
Wow.
We
are the same person.
Two people sharing the same brain. That's how this is gonna be going forward. But yeah, again, let us know if there's a particular series you want us to talk about, whether there's a particular theme or genre you want us to talk about. We have a lot of ideas, and we do want to make this a little bit more of a discussion podcast, looking at things in a more critical way.
Kind of like I don't know. I'm just thinking of like the book podcasts that I like to listen to, and they tend to be like very discussion focused, either about a topic or about a book, and they, go through discussing the sort of themes and their impressions of the book. So I definitely think we are going into this seeing a lot of sort of manga podcasts around that are very focused on collecting as a hobby and on the manga collecting community, whereas we kind of saw a bit of a gap in terms of manga podcasts that are more focused on the manga itself, the series, their themes, manga history, topics relating to, the books themselves. And I think we kind of wanted to try and make a podcast that was more focused on that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let us know your thoughts. Next episode, we don't know what the theme is, but hopefully I'll be able to announce that as well next month. So if you're interested, you can keep an eye out for it. As always, in my videos, I will have my social media down below, so you can contact me either through Twitter, Instagram, whatever you like. I'll also put Ray's various social medias down there. Please subscribe to her channel. She is a wonderful, wonderful creator. She doesn't regularly upload as much as I do, but every time she does, it is amazing, and I learn something, and it's wonderful. So please support her.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else to say, Ray, before I sign off?
Let me know in the comments if you are as passionate about animal pose as I am.
And me.
And G. As we've already said, 2 people, 1 brain. And I will talk to you guys next month.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I am Simply G, joined by my always lovely co-host, Ray from Whimsical Pictures, and we will see you in the next podcast. Bye till then.
Bye for now.